Good evening and welcome to another BIBBA webinar. This evening's webinar is a beginner's Q&A, and we have with us this evening Roger Patterson and Peter Jenkins, who's had lots of time to prepare for this evening. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Thank you for putting on a nice clean shirt.
How do you know it's clean?
Yeah, apologies for the slightly delayed start. Sorry, it was my fault for not sending Peter the appropriate link. So we're a little bit late getting started, but we're here now, and we've had some questions sent in from our avid viewers and our membership. So we'll start off with the first question. I've been told to change my combs every 3 years. Is that super combs as well? I've been told to change my combs every 3 years. Do I change my super combs as well? Who wants to fire away with that one?
Well, I've got some very old super combs. I've never changed those. Only the ones that break in the extractor. I don't know what Roger's going to say about that.
No, it's usually changing the brood combs. I do know of people who actually change the super combs. I think simply because they've been told, change your combs X number of years. But like Peter, I've got some that's 40 years old. Might even be more. And providing they haven't had any brooding, I don't really think there's too much of an issue. I suppose it's arguable whether it's an issue in the first place, but it's probably good practice to change your combs. But no, I don't think there's any need to change super combs. Incidentally, well, if they've had brooding, they're on brood and a half, you're on a different matter. But if they're what I would term virgin comb, so I've had no brooding, I wouldn't bother. I would just carry on with them. I
think that particularly earlier in the spring, in the spring start of the season, I can't talk, I'm sorry. At the beginning of the season, having pre-drawn super comb gives you a head start above other beekeepers that haven't got any combs that have been started on, because the bees can start storing that nectar as quickly as it's coming in, and they're not having to draw out those combs and use that nectar up to draw the wax out that they need.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, Richard. Also, if you've got a colony that's not really that strong, but the queen is being crowded out, it's handy to have somewhere for the bees to put nectar almost straight away, whereas they might not be strong enough really to draw foundation out. You can get you can get this situation because, of course, bees prefer to go vertically rather than horizontally. So if you put a super above and they still got a couple of empty combs in the brood chamber, they would prefer to go up into the super rather than out into the brood chamber.
I don't think beginners.
If you've got not a very strong colony and they're crowding out in the brood box and there's only foundation in the super above, they're not strong enough to have the warmth to draw that foundation out properly. And they might not even bother. They might raise a queen cell and swarm rather than climb up through the queen excluder and start drawing comb up above. Mm. So it's the first super is always better to put a drawn super from last year on there, and then put the next time around, put the foundation underneath it. So that, because warmth, it takes a lot of warmth to draw out foundation. And particularly something that's popular now is plastic foundation. Now, I've never had a great deal of success with plastic foundation. I tried it about 5 years ago. Our bees and our climate just isn't warm enough for it. I don't think I know how others feel about it. But I found that bees prefer wax foundation to plastic foundation, no matter how much coating you put on it.
Yeah. I think the other issue is, Peter, the people don't seem to realise and are not really taught that bees don't really produce wax unless they've got an income with which to produce the wax with. They don't produce a comb, rather. So if there's just a mild sort of flow, they might not build the wax. But the questioner, I can understand where the question comes from, because I keep hearing, oh, you must change your combs, must change your combs, must change your combs, rather than you must change your brood combs. So I can see where the questioner is coming from. And I've heard and even had emails from beekeepers asking about super comb. Should they change super comb? Not in my opinion. If you want to, that's fine, but I don't think there's any need to.
And another thing to think about, bear in mind as well. I don't know how much honey it takes to produce a pound of wax, but I think it's several pounds of honey to produce a pound of wax. Now, if you are looking at producing honey, combs are valuable. They're more valuable than honey, really, because you look after your combs, because you don't want to draw fresh foundation out to store honey, because you're throwing half your crop away. So look after your super combs and use them year on year.
Yeah. I don't want to advertise books, but this is one thing that I have covered in a beekeeping challenge, what you're told, because people come out with these figures. It takes X pound of honey to produce a pound of wax. It will be a very difficult experiment to do. So it's probably no more than guesswork anyway. But let's keep off the commercials, because Richard will tell us off.
Excellent, thank you. So the next question then we've got is, I've read about warm and cold way. Which is the best, warm or cold? Peter, how do you?
I've got some of both. If you got them on the across the way, the warm way, then if you want to call it that. I've been having a look at some today, and the bees are all towards the entrance. One thing that's easy to do is to turn the brood box around 180 degrees, so that now the combs are all at the back and the empty combs are towards the front, and it helps to maybe keep the bees back a bit, so that they don't tend to swarm so early. If it's something that I do, I don't know if it works or not, but I might be fooling myself, but that's something I do. But I got half and half. I got some on warm way, some on cold way. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make a lot of difference.
Just to clarify for any of the beginners that don't know what cold or warm way actually is, it's the orientation of the frames to the entrance of the hive. So if the frames are parallel to the hive entrance, then it is warm way. If they're perpendicular to the hive entrance, then it's cold way. Roger, your opinion?
So thanks for saying that, because it saved me saying it. Actually, this is quite a complex question. There have apparently been lots of experiments done, and it really doesn't matter to monkeys which way around they go. So the warm and cold is got nothing to do with it. Now, if you've got a square hive, like either the British commercial or a national, you can put them both ways on the same floor. But if you use standard floors with, I think, everything else, so that's Smith's, Langstroth's, Dayton's, all of those, then they are going to be so-called cold way. Right, the question is which is best. As far as the bees are concerned, I really don't think they mind at all. It makes a difference to the beekeepers, because if you run them the cold way, which I do, you can actually work from both sides of the hive. If you run them the warm way, you can only sensibly work from the back, so only one side, unless you either stand right in front of the entrance, or you're holding the frames the wrong way around, if you get what I mean. So that is really down to the beekeeper. But one thing that never seems to get mentioned, that I've noticed quite a bit, and the reason I noticed it is because at the Whisper Green teaching apiary, I generally run a couple of hives, run everything the cold way, but apart from a couple of hives that I run the warm way. Why do I run on the warm way? so that beekeepers can see the difference. And in my view, there always is a difference, because what can happen is if you run them the cold way, the bees can expand backwards towards the back of the hive. If you run them the cold way, certainly early in the spring, you can get a frame that the bees fill up with pollen, so you end up with a pollen barrier, and the queen doesn't like laying beyond it, so it does retard the spring build-up. That, I think, gets reflected in the honey take at the end of the year, because I've noticed, certainly with the green and core, I've been running them certainly 15 years. I've noticed that you get a smaller crop off those 2 colonies than we do off everything else. Now, it's not a very good sample because it's quite a small sample. But my guess is that if you ran 50 colonies one way, 50 the other, I suspect you'll get a higher yield with the cold way. Your move.
Yeah, probably I'd agree with that. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I'm for what you were saying about the positioning. It depends where I want to work the hives from, if as to which way it really goes.
Yeah. What also I've seen, Richard, and I have written about this elsewhere, what I have noticed on several occasions, not with my own bees, but other people, you can get isolation starvation if you get a cold spell, because if the bees try to move backwards, they can't do it, because there's the end frame, or the edge frame rather, of the brood box that the bees can't get over, round, or under. And if they run out of food in front of it, they can die of isolation starvation with quite a lot of food on the hive. Now, I have noticed that on several occasions, not with my own bees, but with other people's as well.
Excellent, thank you. So the next question is, in the spring, when there is rape in the area, how do you know if your bees are bringing in spring flower or rape nectar? Obviously, this person understands that the nectar from oilseed rape, when that's turned into honey, becomes quite solid in the combs if you don't get it off quick enough. So they're wanting to know if there's a way that they can tell whether it's rape nectar or just spring flower honey nectar that's coming in.
Well, Peter goes to rape, doesn't it?
I have been taking bees down to rape and bringing them back. You tend to get a lot of honey very early on, and it's wisest to extract it. If you're any doubt, get rid of it straight away. Extract it. Once it goes rock hard in the soup, you stuffed pretty much. But I've always brought the bees back and extracted the honey straight away. And I haven't, the last couple of years, I haven't done it because of lockdown to start with. And I'm not bothering again this year, although there are, I've got a site that I can take bees to, but with the cost of the fuel and going there and back, and I find it that people in my area just don't want to buy the stuff. So I'd rather don't bother.
Yeah, I think with respect, Peter, I think the question was, how does the beekeeper know? Well, you've got beginners there. If you've got fields of oilseed rape within perhaps 1.5 miles of you, you can be fairly certain that the bees are going to collect it anyway. Certainly when it's fresh, you can smell it. It's people say it's like rotten cabbages. Well, to a degree, I suppose it is, but you can actually smell it. It's very light in colour, and if there's a heavy flow on and you've got oilseed rape around you, it's fairly certain it's coming from that. Now the question was, or flower honey. Well, even if it's mixed up, you have got to extract it. So quite frankly, if you get a heavy flow early in the year, I would extract it as a matter of course. Now, we are in a beginners section. So if anyone tries to suggest that you should run for comb honey, don't run for comb honey until the oilseed rape is over, because you'll just have a solid comb honey.
Your customers will be chipping the teeth on your comb honey.
Well, funny enough, I've come across some people who like it, granulated comb honey, but you know, and it's not always beekeepers.
Lots of people like to use oilseed rape honey to produce soft set.
Yeah, yeah.
And
but what you don't want to do is melt it out of combs if you possibly can, because that is really the only way of sensibly doing it. You can do a few tricks, like uncap it, dunk it in a bucket of water, put it underneath the existing brood chamber and get the bees to take it up. But of course, don't put supers on, because they just liquefy it, take it up, and you've got the same problem. The bees really need to use it for raising brood. So if you're making nukes, then it will be okay. If you do melt it out, I suggest you just use it for yourself cooking honey or something like that. Don't feed it back to the bees, because it will granulate again.
we've had a kind of a follow-up question to that with when you say extract oilseed rape honey straight away, does it have to be capped?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Peter.
Yeah. Well, the trick is if it's capped, it's ripe. If it's not capped, it's not necessarily not ripe. And the way to tell is hold the comb on its side and give it a shake. If it drips out, it's not ripe. But if it doesn't drip out, you can extract it. That's the way I was taught. I don't know if that's is a rule of thumb. It's a rule of thumb. It is always a risk. There's always a risk of fermentation, and like Roger said, if I do take bees down the oilseed rape these days, I tend not to extract the honey, but get them to store it on brood combs, and use the brood combs and make it up nukes later on.
Yeah, you could. Excuse me. You could check it for water content, and really, it's down to your local association to teach you or show you how to use a refractometer, because that's what beekeepers do. Now, the problem, of course, is if you get, well, so of course, it's not perhaps obvious. If you get a comb of unsealed honey, it's going to be different water content throughout the comb. Probably towards the middle and the top is going to be a lower water content than the outside. So in general, I think I'd go along with what Peter suggested. Turn it on its side, give it a good shake. If anything drops out, I wouldn't extract it. Or if you do extract it, use it up quickly for yourself.
Thank you very much. Somebody's saying here, I'm getting my first nuke in a couple of weeks. How long can I keep them in the nuke if the weather is not suitable to transfer them into a hive?
You going, Peter?
Yeah, okay. Well, it depends how strong they are. If they're bursting out the box, then obviously they need more space. And don't forget that if you've got sealed brood in there, one frame of sealed brood will make 3 frames of bees when they hatch in a couple of weeks' time. So I would get them into a brood chamber, give them plenty of room as quick as you can. If it's going to be a couple of weeks, it's going to be quite early on in the season. And don't let the bees start to think that they're going to become overcrowded, because they'll put up cells and they'll swarm, even if they're only in a nuke box.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. What is going to cause you not to change them over? Well, if it's hammering down with rain, obviously that is one. But depending on where you are, if it rains one day, it probably won't the next anyway. So you should be okay for that. If it's cold, then don't do anything. But if bees are flying, and especially if they're bringing in pollen, I reckon it's okay to handle bees, because all you're doing really is just transferring from one box into another. Depending on where the nuke came from, if it's a commercial nuke, the chances are it's probably got an imported queen. If it's got an imported queen, it's going to be prolific. Therefore, you may have a lot of brood in there. And as Peter says, a frame of brood, sealed brood, can be a frame of 3 frames of bees when it emerges. So you need to be careful, because if anybody ever tells you that nukes don't swarm, just don't believe them, because they will. I would personally get it into a full-size box as soon as you can.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. And it's if it's cold, right, provided it's 10 degrees centigrade or more. If it's cold, do it early in the afternoon, and then the bees have got time to warm up the hive before it goes dark and before it goes cold overnight, even if it freezes overnight or something. And 10 degrees is sort of rule of thumb temperature wise, and unless it's tipping down with rain, if it's only light drizzle or something, get your wife to hold an umbrella over it, and while you work on it, and do it very quickly. Don't waste time.
Or your husband.
or your husband, or your partner, and give them a veil and let them hold the umbrella while you do it, and don't waste time, and do it as quickly as you can. And then it's better to do that and risk a bit than it is to leave it, because once the bees have got it in their heads that they're going to put up queen cells, then it's you're on a fight to, you're going nowhere.
Right, here's a trick you can do. If it's genuinely too cold, get a piece of plastic from an animal food bag, dog food bag or something, tough plastic that's 4, 5, 6 inches bigger than the brood box, because you're obviously going to put it into a brood box. Cut a hole in it. It's just a bit smaller than the plan or the top view of the nuke box. Pin that onto the bottom of the brood chamber with drawing pins all the way around. Take the crown board of the box off, the nuke box. Put the brood chamber over the nuke box, so that if it's empty, you're looking straight down onto most of the tops of frames of what's underneath. Then put your foundation or whatever you've got above that, so the bees can actually come into it, and they're using it almost as a double nuke box. That's if the weather forecast is bad, let's say for the next week or so. But if it was okay, going to be okay in a day or two, then I wouldn't bother about that. But these are the sort of things that you can do that you won't find in books. Of course, you've got to buy an animal in order to buy a bag of food for it. But in all honesty, I save all my dog food bags because they really are quite tough plastic, and they're very useful for all sorts of things like that. I've even made temporary hive roofs out of them. So that's just a useful tip.
Excellent. Of course, you could speak to your local beekeeping association and see if they have a spare nuke brood chamber, if going spare, that you could use as well. But that's a great tip. Next one is, Roger, you'll like this one. I am in the process of changing over to castellated spacers. I have 11 slotted for brood and 10 slot for supers. Would it be a good idea to have one super with 11 slot castellation, so that when I need to get the bees to draw out the new foundation, you can put the frames closer together, or is that just a waste of time and effort?
Right. So what's the relevance of the brood chamber to start with? What's
So it's got 11 slot castellations in the brood and 10 in the supers.
Yeah, don't do what one of our daft members did on one occasion. They were doing both supers and brood chamber, and they ended up with, I think, in a brood chamber, they ended up with a 11 slot one end of the box and a 9 the other. So you you've got to be careful with that sort of thing. Yeah, there's no problem with the brood chamber. What I will say is that I generally drop them down about 3 millimeters, something like that. Not very much. 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch, so that they're just below the outside of the box. Now, if you do that in every box you've got, you maintain your bee space. Right, now the next question was, they've got 10 slot in the supers.
Should they have one super that is 11 slots so that they can use that for drawing out brand new super frames?
No, I wouldn't. What most people do, in fact, what I do is I have 11 for drawing out super frames, and once they're drawn out, they go to 9. But what you don't often hear is if you have 10 slots in, the bees will actually draw them out, but they do need, in my experience, quite a decent flow in order to do it. Otherwise, they do tend to build down in between. Now, the reason you can get away with it is because manly frames are 10 spaces. You don't get 11 or 9s with manlies. They are 10s, and they work. 10 is actually quite a good compromise because you can get foundation drawn out, and you can also use them for combs. So I think it's quite a compromise, but you should be okay. But do as I say. No, I don't mean it quite like that. But if you put foundation on 10s, I would be careful to do it when there's a quite a good flow on, so that the bees are just roaring to get working on the foundation, rather than fiddle around and building the gap in between.
Yeah, I agree with that. 10 frames are drawing out. I've got manly frames on a lot of supers, and 10 to draw out, and then the following year when they are drawn out, I open them up to 9 and just do it by eye, pretty much, without using the spacers. But 10, they will draw out 10, and as Roger says, you need a reasonably good flow, and you need the strong colony of bees to give you the warmth.
Yeah,
that's something we struggle with here in Wales.
I tell you, those nucs, when you put a second brood body on, don't half roar away when in comparison to a brood box with that heat chimneying up the center. It's
yeah.
I always I have an extra nuc brood box, and I always let the bees expand into 2 nuc brood boxes, and then transfer them into a full size hive, because I find that they get started a lot quicker.
Yeah, well, we do the live at the hive, Richard.
Oh, do we? What's that?
You better tell people. You better read about it first. I did one or a couple last year on the Morris board, where I got 2 half boxes above a Morris board for queen rearing, and that's the ones I've used. I've probably used them for 40 years now. People keep on and on and on these days about Mike Palmer and his brood factories. That's exactly the same as a lot of us have been doing for years and years and years. And people seem to think it's a new idea. It's not new. It's old, and that is the case. Yeah, if you get a strong nuke, put another half box on top of it, and the bees will. If you've got a flow on, they will build it out in no time.
Mm. Yeah. This next one is a bit wordy, so stick with me. It's from the West Midlands. this person has put 9 colonies into the winter last year, and all 9 are alive so far, but 2 are fairly weak, 1 frame of brood only in each hive, and he's spotted varroa mites on top of bees, so he's reckoning that the mite count is quite high. What can he do with them, or are they winter losses? Roger?
Oh, you're picking on me, are you? Yeah, okay. Right, this is one of those questions that is very difficult to give the right answer, having not seen the colony. But if there's an issue there with varroa, that obviously needs dealing with. I think it's probably a bit on the early side now. So if they've got 9 colonies, quite honestly, if they lose a couple, it should be a learning instance. But if you've only got 4 colonies and you lose 2, then that is a different matter. What you could do, I wouldn't suggest doing it now. We've got to be careful during this time of the year, because I've just had 10 really good days in my area, but the weather forecast for this coming weekend is going to be barely above freezing, both Saturday and Sunday. So what I could have got away with 2 or 3 days ago, I'm not going to be able to get away with 2 or 3 days time. So you've got to be careful, especially with beginners. If it was a bit later, there's lots of things that you can do. I think you've got to get the numbers of bees up first, one of which is to swap positions with a stronger hive. Now, that needs to be done carefully, because if there's, let's say, oilseed rape, you don't really want to lose your flying force. But on the other hand, if it's a really strong colony, you can help delay swarming. That's one thing. Another thing you could do is put seal brood in from other colonies, because hopefully that won't have a high varroa count. So you can, what I'm trying to do is get the colony another 4 weeks further ahead, and then you've got a very, very different situation. You've got lots of things that you can do. The West Midlands, the weather probably isn't going to be that much different from me, but it will be, although it's probably level with Peter, his temperature, I think, was several degrees lower. So that could make a bit of difference. But I think you've got to get some bees in there, and then of course you can treat it for a varroa.
Yeah, I agree with that, Roger. You definitely need to get some bees in there, because if varroa is causing them that much of a problem, the bees will tend to give up the ghost, and they'll get to a point where they just throw the towel in, and it doesn't matter what you do to them, they're going to die, and they'll just go be another winter loss. But it depends how much you want to save them, if you want to boost them up. But really, to be honest, you shouldn't have let them get into that condition where the varroa is, overtaking them that much.
Yeah, it's not an easy, Peter, because we've got beginners, and we don't know the we don't know the situation.
We don't know the full story. No.
Yeah. I mean, if they were advised, let's say, not to treat.
Well, he actually does say in his message, I tried to truncate it slightly, but I treated with max in the summer and oxalic acid in the December. And he said that they went strongly into winter, but now they're weak.
Both of which should have.
Well, oxalic acid treatment in the winter should have knocked the varroa right out, and the varroa shouldn't be a problem now. Shouldn't be a problem.
No, it's difficult to know what to say. But of course, the thing is, the smaller the colony gets, especially if it's dwindled, the much higher level of varroa compared to the brood and the bees. So of course that is aggravating it. One thing that could happen, I know it's a bit early, but put drone comb in one of the other colonies, and once it's sort of 3 days from being sealed, put that in the smaller colonies to try and trap the varroa. Do that several times, and that might get over it. As I say, it is not easy. I mean, we don't know how smaller colonies are or anything. I think though that I would requeen if the beekeeper can get them through. I think I'd probably requeen them.
Yeah, I agree. But without seeing them ourselves, it's very difficult to make firm recommendation, you know.
Yeah.
So the next question is, I've got my first colony through the winter so far. I'd like to have a second. When and how do I do that? Peter?
Wait until May, either they might even raise their own queen cells and try and swarm. But if you wait until May and take a nuke, or wait and get a queen cell from the association or somebody like that, but wait until May and then you can do a split. And worst case scenario, you can do a walk away split. You could just split it into 2 boxes and walk away and let them raise their own queen. But it depends. Do you belong to an association? If you belong to an association, you can cooperate and work with others. But if it's your first hive and you're on your own, then perhaps a walk-away split might be as good as anything. Roger?
Yeah, I think I think I'd advise the person to get a local queen if they possibly can. Now, you get into May, and people are going to have queen cells locally. It depends why they want. Well, obviously they want a second colony to increase the numbers for obvious reasons. It depends when they want to do it. If it's early in the season, what they could do is one of my 2-frame nukes, which is we've done a webinar on that, and I think there's a video as well, isn't there, Richard? I can't remember, but it's certainly on Dave Cushman's website. A 2-frame nuke which works really well.
Yeah.
If you've got a swarming, the current colony is swarming early, then you haven't got a problem, because of course you've got your own queen cells. I would have a chat with somebody locally as to which colony to leave the queen with, because in some instances you would leave it with a parent colony, and in other instances you would leave it with a nuke. But that doesn't matter too much. But certainly a 2-frame nuke, if you make it up anywhere in May, you'll have a colony well strong enough to go into winter. And
just to point out, Roger, because we've been caught out with this before, because in America, a 2-frame nuke, I think, is a different thing to what you're talking about. So it's important that people do go out to the Dave Cushman website and have a look at. That's 2 frames in a 5-frame box, the way that you use it. It's not a 2-frame box.
2-frame box, yeah.
That they use in America.
That's what happens when somebody else pinches your terminology, isn't it? Okay. One of my 2-frame nukes, but any swarm control method will give you increase, and what you can do is you can sort of bypass the swarm control bit, and you can still do exactly the same thing, but get the bees to raise their own queens, or somebody locally is going to have a queen in local association or queen cells.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, excellent. This one is about a month ago, I found a large number of dead bees outside my previous strong colony. Some were shivering and hairless and unable to fly. Last week, I opened up the hive and only the queen is left and a small number of nurse bees, no brood. I am assuming the colony will die out. There are lots of stores in the super and left in the colony, and it was treated for varroa. What have I done wrong? And can I reuse the combs? Do I need to treat the combs before reuse? So there's an awful lot in there. So first of all, hairless, shivering bees in a pile outside the hive entrance.
Ooh.
Chronic bee paralysis virus?
Without a doubt, really, which there's no direct cure for. I have to tell the questioner that colony, in my opinion, is doomed. So
And
yeah,
also, they haven't done anything wrong.
Oh no. No, it's the shivering and the sort of black hairless bees that is the issue. Chronic bee paralysis virus. I would suggest that the questioner looks online at a reliable source, not one of these people that are coming up with their wonderful videos that sing and dance these days. Go to the National Bee Unit, or a responsible and reliable source. But I'm pretty certain that's what it is.
Yes, Peter. All right to reuse the combs?
Well, I refer to Roger on that one. I haven't had chronic bee paralysis myself, and I'd be on a learning curve if I did come across it. I don't think there's an issue, not for chronic bee paralysis virus. There may be for other things. So if they want to fumigate them, or if they are getting a bit on the ancient side, just scrap them for that, but not really for viruses. I don't think there's any evidence that that is a problem. Fumigate in there, it wouldn't hurt. You don't know what else is in there.
Yeah. And that is done with acetic acid, 80%, I believe.
Yeah.
And again,
horrible stuff.
Yeah. And again, it's not what you want to put on your fish and chips. Again, if you have a look on the bee unit, they've got information on.
Put everything, put the whole thing in a plastic bag and a cloth of that on top. But be careful, because it does eat away your frame nails. Things tend to fall to pieces afterwards.
Yeah, and concrete. So make sure that you're not.
Well, you wouldn't put the combs in a concrete bag, would you?
or have concrete nails.
No, not unless you live in the land of concrete parachutes.
Okay, so let's have a look at the next question. We've had some come through on YouTube as well. Underfloor entrances, why are they not as popular as normal entrances? This questioner says he uses underfloor entrances, and it doesn't seem why they're not more popular.
What for? Why is underfloor? Why do you want an underfloor entrance?
Good question. I know that some people say that underfloor entrances are easier to defend for the bees, for wasps and things at the end of the season.
Yeah. To the best of my knowledge, the earlier ones were Scottish, so used by the heather honey beekeepers, those that went to heather. And there's one which I've actually got. It's called a Williamson floor, and it's probably 70 or 80 years old. I'm afraid, although I've looked all over the place, I cannot find any information about it. But it's very, very similar to what people these days call the underfloor entrance. It used to be used for the Scottish heather moors to to prevent the draft going up into the hive. I think that's why they had it. But they also found that because the entrance was actually quite inside the colony, wasps didn't like going in there, so it helped reduce the wasps. Incidentally, I'm still using mine, and I've got it in use right now. I'm making up some mating nucs, and I'm putting underfloor entrances in those, simply because certainly towards the end of the season, mating nucs can get robbed out. So that's why I'm doing it. As to why they're not popular, I've no idea. I assume it's just that people are used to the front entrance, and they don't change.
Yeah.
Really, I don't think there's any reason not to use them. A little bit more difficult to construct, but certainly this Williams floor that I've got is no different than anything else. It's a really good piece of kit, but they haven't made them for years.
Next one is, I find that I get a lot of pollen in my super that the worker bees take up. Is it something that I'm doing, or is it the queen excluder? Peter?
Pollen in the super is something you get in a strong colony. You get one way around it is to have drone foundation in your supers. Drone foundation has got several advantages. One of them is that the honey is easy to extract, and the other one is that the bees will never store pollen up there. But strong colonies tend to have a natural sort of band of pollen around the brood. And if there's a little bit crowded in the brood box, that's the first thing they do is put the pollen above the excluder in worker cells. But as I say, if you use drone cells up there, they won't put pollen up there.
So the worker bees don't store pollen in drone?
Not in my experience.
Not usually. They might, the odd one or two. In fact, I've seen pollen in queen cups, but it's fairly rare. It's all intents and purposes. You get over the problem. There's just an arch above the in the central combs between the above the brood nest. That's all. So yeah, Peter's absolutely spot on. Now there is a view that if the queen gets to the queen excluder, you'll get a whole load of drones in the super. Well, that used to be the case when we had the old long slot zinc excluders. They used to distort badly, and of course the queen could get through. I cannot remember the last time I've had a queen get through an excluder. So that's why I recommend to people now that they just use a drone comb in the supers.
Yeah, well, I hadn't had a queen in the super for years until last year. I had one last year, but it's unusual. It's unusual. In the old days, as I say, it was quite a common thing, and you spent a lot of time hunting for queens in supers with the old zinc. It was
it was a zinc long slot, Peter, wasn't it? Yeah.
So drone comb at least in the first super on a colony to try and avoid storing pollen in there. Yeah,
if you've got a mixture, then put what I generally do is as I have, because you accumulate things over the years. I've put the 2 outside frames in a 9-frame box. The 2 outside frames a worker comb, and the middle one's drone. And I very, very rarely have any problem. It's a lot easier. Otherwise, what can happen is, well, 2 things. One is put your extractor horribly out of balance, so you're chasing it around the kitchen. And the other thing is the bees have worked hard to bring in all that pollen. So what happens is it goes mold in the back of the shed.
Yeah. Yeah. Good evening from Dublin, Ireland. With the recent weather, fresh nectar and strong colonies are relative for this time of year. Would you super early and put a super above the crown board for warmth? Old beekeeper's trick to put a super above the crown board so that the bees can expand into it when they're ready and it's warm enough.
No, I don't think a crown board will work because you've got a fairly small hole there, and I don't think the bees will go through unless they're absolutely pushed. If you want to try tricks like that, just put a couple of sheets of newspaper over the brood box, and then the queen excluder, and then the supers. And if the bees need a space, they'll chew through the newspaper. No, I certainly wouldn't put it above a crown board.
And supering this time of year, 1 super, 2 supers, 3 supers, 4?
It depends where they are, really. Some of the spring forage, especially trees, can give quite a heavy flow, and of course the queen hasn't really got laying yet. Now, as I keep saying, brood is very hungry, so if they haven't got that much brood, there's much more to store. And I know the willow's almost over in my area. I expect it is most others. In the past, I've had a super willow honey in the spring, not this year, but and only ever a couple of 3 times. But yeah, it's probably worth putting a super on if.
Definitely. I went through one apiary yesterday. I didn't go through all the combs, but 2 colonies in particular were very, very strong. And I put 2 supers on 2 on nationals now, two supers on 2 of them. And they were piling up there, and there was something, they were getting something. But that's on the edge of Corsica on there, on the 8,000-year-old bog, so I don't know what they were getting, but they were bringing in pollen, and there was a flow on.
Yeah. One thing I will say, Richard, was that I went from Sussex to Nottinghamshire at the weekend, and it's now the 29th of March, and there were several fields of oilseed rape in full bloom alongside the motorway.
Yeah.
Now that is early, like very early. So I don't know about Dublin. Probably not oilseed rape there, but for anybody else, just keep your eyes skinned.
Yeah.
Probably the next week won't be an issue, but you've only got to get 2 or 3 warm days, and the bees can bring in a lot of nectar.
I'm grateful that this weekend's going to be a bit cold, actually, because I want to move some bees to some oilseed rape, and it is starting to flower. So it's we need to get our skates on this year.
Yep.
Excellent. Would it be a good idea to try and use oilseed rape in the spring to get bees to draw out lots of fresh comb rather than letting bees store it? Have you paid this person, Roger Patterson? Because one of Roger's things that he says is your first. Well, I'll let you tell him, Roger.
Well, I wonder what they're trying to say, because I might get it wrong. I might change my mind since then, anyway.
So what Roger usually professes is the first super that you put on there, make it a brood chamber, and get the bees to use the oilseed rape to draw out some lovely new brood combs. But you still tend to need to extract from those, don't you, Roger?
Yeah. Well, of course, bees won't build comb unless they've got a use for it. They need an income to produce a wax, to produce a comb, and they also need to put something in it, which is either food or a brood, obviously. So whatever happens, they're not just going to build comb and leave it as comb. They're going to fill it with something, which of course is going to be oilseed rape. If you possibly can, that is a really good time to get brood combs drawn out, and that's what I do, and I've done it for years and years and years. Well, yeah, certainly since the 70s, anyway. And it
Adam
works really
asks,
well.
if you could perhaps swap out the drawn comb as it's being completed and replace it with more foundation.
Yeah, I think in general though, a colony will draw it out. What the problem is, if you fiddle around like that, Richard, is you very often find the bottom corners get left.
Yeah.
That is a problem. And then perhaps you leave it in the shed until you need it. You then put it in a colony, and the bees then don't build on that properly. I think I'd prefer to get the combs drawn out fully.
Yeah.
That only answered part of the question. What was the first part?
No, that was it. Should we use the oilseed rate flow in the spring to get the bees to draw out lots of fresh comb rather than letting the bees store the nectar instead? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Let's be careful. If people want the honey, then put combs on. If you want a bit of honey and some drawn combs, then put and I mean good drawn combs. Bees build, in my experience, they build much better combs above a queen excluder in a flow than they would if you put the foundation in the brood chamber.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Next question is, I'm on a limited budget.
So am I. Well done.
Are second hive parts and frames good value?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Roger?
Well, I thought Peter might want to say a bit more of that, but not to worry. Yeah, personally, I reckon they're brilliant. Let's take the frames first. They are very reasonably priced. They do come in packs of 50, which might put certainly beginners off if they've only got a hive or two. But frames will keep for 100 years, so don't worry too much about that. If I have to cannibalize something, I'm certainly never going to lose more than one frame. Yes, you do get a few knots. The real problem is the bottom bars, but you can generally fiddle them one way or another. So I reckon the frames are really good value, and the price is such that it's probably not even worth trying to clean them. But if you want to clean them, it doesn't really matter. Now, the great thing about the hive parts is that they are made from Western red cedar, but not the prime quality that comes from Canada, but it's grown in the UK in sustainable regenerating forest, if you get what I mean. Now, that means that they're not fully mature trees, so you do get knots in, but they're usually live knots, and they don't fall out. What you've got to watch out for is if you go to the sales and pick them up, have a look to see where you're going to drive nails and make sure there's no knots where you're going to drive nails, and you can sort them. And the suppliers, I reckon, are really good. They will let you do it. Now, I checked online on one occasion, and it was on one of these timber websites, and the life expectancy durability in open areas that is not permanently wet is 60 years. So I reckon that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
If you see a white bit on a board that's lighter than the rest, I would avoid that, because you'll find that is softer, and I think that's a sapwood, and that might rot a bit quicker. But other than that, I reckon they're really good value.
Yeah.
Did you have a top tip for knots in wood and covering them up, Roger? I seem to remember when I was in the apiary with you, we were talking about a bean tin can. Was it you?
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, this is if you get on the odd occasion that you're going to get a dead knot and the knot falls out. Yeah, if you very often these days, canned foods have got aluminium cans, and probably with a ring pull lid, well, you can just use that to nail over the hole. It's very thin, and it shouldn't be a problem.
On the inside, yeah.
Well, you do it on the outside as well.
Right.
It's also good if you get a woodpecker hole.
We don't tend to get woodpeckers down in Wales. I don't think they can get across the Severn Bridge or something, but they're quite uncommon down here. But I don't bother with a baked bean tin or to mend the holes. What I carry a gorilla tape, and I find this gorilla is like duct tape, but it's very, very strong. It doesn't want to come off. And just carry gorilla tape with me, and I cut a bit off and I stick it over the hole, and it's used for all sorts of things, right? Supers don't quite meet when you put the super clearers on and things like that. This gorilla tape is wonderful stuff.
Excellent.
I finished now.
If you are, this question says, one of the BIBBA webinars mentioned putting combs in the freezer to kill wax moth. How long do they need to put the combs in the freezer for?
Till the wax moths are dead.
Which I reckon is about a week. Yeah, but a week, you should be okay. But don't forget, if you're talking about domestic freezer, it depends how cold it's set.
Yeah.
But mine I'll find is about a week. I don't know what mine's got numbers rather than a temperature. So yeah, I reckon about a week, Richard.
Excellent. And probably the final question then this evening, because we've done an hour now. I had my bees last year. How do I do spring cleaning with my colonies? So this person's brought their colony through the winter. What are they going to do in the spring? What spring cleaning tasks have they got to do? What do you do, Peter?
The must do is change the floor. Get a clean floor, and put the hive to one stand, put the clean floor on the stand, and then move the brood box back over so that they've got a clean floor underneath. And that's the minimum. I think Roger does a bit more. He changes the whole brood box and everything. But I don't normally do that, but I just change the floor. And you find all sorts of debris. And what you find on the old floor can tell you quite a lot. Some colonies, they won't be very much there. Some will be a lot of dead bees and maybe damp or creepy crawlies and things. But they've got a clean hive pretty much to be going on with it if you change the floor. But if you want to be more meticulous, you can change the whole brood box. Roger.
Yeah, he said I do more than I do. I reckon that gives you an opportunity to give the colony a really good working over and make sure. Sorry, I thought my video was off. Yeah, make sure everything is up to speed. So I would do it on a day when the bees are flying well. Get everything, or this is what I do. I get. In fact, Richard, we're going to do a video on this in the next few weeks, so it'll give you something else to edit. Yeah, clean everything. So floor, brood chamber, crown board. You don't need to bother about the roof. Don't forget, I'm on single brood chamber. So what I do is I move the existing hive complete over to one side, put a fresh floor down, clean brood box. Take the crown board off the hive, smoke the bees, run the hive tool over the tops of the frames to clean off any wax and propolis and that sort of stuff. Then move the whole colony frame by frame in exactly the same way as it's in the existing box. I think it's important early in the year to make sure that the bees know where everything is, because so even in my area we can still have frost right until early May. That means that the bees will go back into semi-cluster. If you start shunting brood around, you could end up with chilled brood. I'm not saying you're going to, and chilled brood is a lot rarer than people make out. So move each frame across one by one. Check on each frame, especially on the ends of the frames. Scrape off any surplus propolis. Down the sides of the bars, scrape off any, and the bottom as well. Look at the combs. Have a look to see if they're serviceable. If you've only got a quarter or half of the frame that's of any use, then put a drawing pin in the top of it, and that's the one that you've got to change at some time. So handle the combs over the top of the existing box until you find the queen. When you find the queen, move her across, keep your eye on her, and if she's not marked and not clip and mark her. That's I do that as a matter of course anyway, but you can get a late supersedure or one you missed last year. So move them across one by one. Once you know where the queen is, then shake the bees off the combs. Check for European foul brood in the unsealed brood, and American foul brood in the sealed brood. Have a look at everything else. Make sure there's no chalk brood, or if there is, there's only a small, tiny bit. Which, if it's only a small amount, then the chances are it will clear up in a few weeks anyway. And then move them across one by one. Once you've got it fully complete, put a new crown board on and the roof, and the existing box, scrape out, check to see that there's nothing wrong with it, so it doesn't need extra nails in, or all sorts of things like that, and then use that for the next colony. That's how I do it. Different people do things in different ways.
When you say put a new or a clean brood box on the new floor,
yep.
What do you mean by a clean brood box? What have you done to that? I know that some people scorch them. Yeah, what do you do?
I don't scorch. I never have. I just scrape out with the hive tool. I just never really got round to scorching, and of course, in the last few years, we've been told that where the bees coat the inside of the box with propolis, that's effectively self-medication. So if you scorch out, in my book, you're destroying the bees' natural method of dealing with pests, pathogens, diseases. So that's why I don't do it. But if you want to scorch it out, do so. I know somebody in North Wales who's got 3 colours of hives. He's got green, brown, and a reddy sort of color, brick red sort of colour. He scorches out all the green ones one year, the brown ones the next year, and the red ones the following year. So he's scorching out on a 3-year cycle. If you want to do that, fine. If you've got time to do it, that's okay.
Excellent. I'm mindful of the time and the audience as well. Thank you so much for this evening, for giving up your time to come and answer these brilliant questions that have come in from both members and the general public.
Yeah, good set they were. I enjoyed answering them.
Yeah. We have next week Q&A for progressive beekeepers, and then we've got another one coming up about another couple about breeding bees and how people have gone about it. So look out for the BIBBA communications, and also if you're not a BIBBA member, make sure you go to the BIBBA website and at least sign up for the webinar notification so that you don't miss anything. And of course, beekeeping.events, we publicize on there as well. So if you've got any beekeeping events or talks, add them to beekeeping.events. And then everybody is aware of what's happening when, and it avoids us all providing webinars on the same evening. But
excuse me, Richard, can I nip in, please? Because I was asked today what a progressive beekeeper was. Well, I'm afraid the terminology was mine, because I couldn't think of what I really meant. And in beekeeping, there's different ways of describing a beginner or intermediate or an improver or experienced beekeeper or whatever. Really what I was trying to get across was those all levels that actually want to learn more and perhaps get different ideas. So they may not take up that idea, but they might think to themselves, if I modify it, I'll do so and so. That's really where I was coming from. So it's really people who don't just want to do what they've always done, but people who are perhaps looking at different ways of doing things, different sort of angles and that sort of thing.
Yeah, try something different to see what happens.
Yep, that's right.
Try something different to see what happens, even if you only do it in 1 or 2 hives, and it might be a good idea, and try and do it on more next year. You never know. You never know what you learn. And
the other thing I want to mention, Richard, you've almost done it anyway, is we'll be starting live at the hive soon. And it's just a case of suggesting to people that they register. We won't be doing anything this Saturday and Sunday because the weather forecast, or rather the temperature forecast, looks pretty low.
Yeah.
So sorry for butting in.
No, not at all. And if you are a BIBBA member, don't forget there is the Live at the Hive WhatsApp group to give you the latest information, because obviously when we're doing things live, we have to, it's all weather dependent and things. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Thanks again, gentlemen, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay, thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.